Hello, this is Kevin Brooks, author of Glider Infantryman Behind Enemy Lines in World War II. Today we're presenting an interview with Larry Michaelis. Larry was a soldier in the 327 Glider Infantry Company C. And in part one of this interview, Larry will be talking about his time in England as well as Operation Market Garden and his experiences in World War II in the Battle for Holland.
Oh, once I was happy, but now I'm airborne, riding in gliders all tattered and torn. The pilots are daring, all caution they scorn, and the pay is exactly the same.
Adderley Hall. John Ernest looked it up once. It was for sale. He used it for £1,000,000. Got sent to the 370. They made it just as dang miserable as they could, so you wanted to get the heck out of there. No training on Sundays, but they didn't let you sit lay around. They blow the whistle, get out of the police area. Well, after about 6 times in one day, they're picking up stuff. What the heck's out there to pick up after that? May 29th, 1924. His birthday about 4 days after he got off the boat. Well, we got some later on, and we're younger. I don't know.
So what was your rank?
PFC.
So you got to the 327 in May.
I blew the whistle one night and called everybody out, and they started reading off names. Get on the bus. Had 3 buses. I think it was 3 buses sitting there. You just volunteered for the 327 glider infantry.
So you had no idea what you were getting into.
No.
You didn't go to France. Did you do some glider training while the others were in France?
Yeah. A little bit. That's when they finally started giving some pay, extra pay for glider.
So what was your specific duty at that point?
Rifleman. I was there for a few days, and so we reported to the regiment headquarters. I went down there, and they set up a special unit for a while. They were making panels. You know what an egg crate looks like. Well, they were made just like that, according to scale. They were panels about that square. You could lay them on the floor, and then one panel was next to that, and the next drop area. Well, they burned them twice that I know. Patton kept running across the drop zone before they took off. First of all, he was picking out ones that took woodworking. He hands me a pistol. These 3 are just privates. They're in charge. You're going to guard the door. What the heck difference does it make as far as woodworking, or if I just sat by the door with a pistol? It makes sense to me. But
So were you drafted?
yeah.
What crossed your mind when you got the draft notice?
Well, I was expecting, of course, I was expecting it right away. As soon as they lowered the draft age to 18, I got the notice in within a few days.
So where did you train at?
Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Did you go through New York City then to go to England?
Nope. Boston.
Boston.
And 2 Tennessee maneuvers, and then the division went to Camp Atterbury near Indianapolis.
So when you were in Tennessee, that didn't involve gliders. Sure.
Yeah, he was in the 106th at first.
So did you have anybody else when you got put into the 101st? Was there anybody else with you that you could?
There was a few of them. Mm-hmm. Not very many of them. The Army seems to, if they moved you around, they throw you in a bunch of people that you never saw before. Those casual companies that they set up, they go just as well. We kept all of one company run, but oh no, put about 3 in this one, 3 in that one. A couple dozen different casual companies. When they get ready to leave, they put them at the airport behind barbed wire. You can't get out, nobody could get in. Marshland areas, they call them.
So what went through your mind as they were getting ready to go? Just doing your duty, what you were told to do, or?
So we lived in Madison. At the glider symposium, it came out that they were training glider pilots by Janesville. That's about 40 miles south of us. Nobody ever knew that they said that time that they leased some farmland and put some temporary buildings. And I was going to high school. Nobody knew that was going on down there.
And so then the rest of that, until the 327 got back, you were, that's when you were on guard duty, some?
Until they got ready to go to Holland. They didn't have time to make those panels in, so they made sand tables for all the briefing areas.
So how did the integration go with the combat veterans at that point?
That was all right.
Some of the guys who didn't go to France, like Jack, talked about how it was pretty rough. Sometimes the other guys just didn't want to, for a variety of reasons, really didn't welcome the replacements very well. But you didn't have that experience that you recall?
No.
So then you did get some glider training over the summer though, before.
Oh, getting the glider up and down, that's about it.
How many times do you have to do that to get your wings?
I don't remember.
So Jack's first flight in a glider was going to Holland. He didn't get a chance to do any of the practice runs. He got there way too late. But
I remember I was about 3.5 hours. England, our glider got lost in the fog. As soon as you got across the English Channel, ran into the fog, you couldn't see your tow plane most time. You come out of the fog bank once on the glider with the head of the plane.
up above.
Well, I were up above to get out of Papa Wash, but we were like that when we came out of the fog bank.
He was in a B company glider though,
You were in a B company.
because they just loaded him up. When it was full, they loaded the next one up. So he didn't have anybody. Did you have anybody with C company with you? Yeah, you were the only C company in that glider.
Yeah, I want to come back to some of the glider ride, but before I forget where I want to go with this, then when you got there, did you stay with the B guys, or did you immediately go to try to find your?
Well, as soon as they were camping out in the woods, we got the thing crashed is what it did. I don't know if their plane was running out of fuel, they cut them loose or what the heck. They cut us loose anyway. Pilot brought it down on the field just like it was on the airport, till all of a sudden hit a ditch and tore the wheels off, and tore that latch off in the back and underneath the front, flip up. We didn't know it. We had bullet holes in the wings, and one guy sitting right across from me, he had a seat like this. The bullet came right between, up about 2 feet, flopped over, spent. We landed, he said, I want that bullet. He couldn't find it before.
So then, you guys hit a ditch. How do you know how fast you were going when you hit that
I
ditch?
don't have any idea.
Fast enough.
Yeah.
And did it flip over?
No, it didn't flip over.
Was there water in the ditch at all?
No. There's a ditch about that deep. It's a drainage ditch.
So as you're going across, were you able to see any enemy soldiers?
British Army loaded us in the truck, started hauling us toward the front. Called us for 3 days before we
So they landed behind.
finally got into it.
line.
Finally got up with a convoy, U.S. convoy is heading, and there was shells. Rode the rest of the way, is it not?
Okay,
Loaded artillery shells.
so you didn't get to the landing zone.
Nope.
Do you know where you were?
No.
The only thing he knows is that
They didn't.
natives were speaking French. So I don't know if he was in Belgium or northern France when they landed.
Okay.
There were people farmers running from every direction. But within about 5 minutes, there must have been 40 or 50 people standing around there. Parlez-vous français? No, nobody parlez-vous français.
If they had, you would have known where you were.
I don't know why we didn't ask those British that were hauling us around where the heck we were, but we didn't.
I'm sure you were just like overwhelmed with everything.
Big relief.
Because you said when you landed, whoever was in charge told you to set up the guns.
Well, they had machine guns. Set the machine gun up. Which direction you want to set it up? Nobody around.
So the bullet coming up through the floor for that one guy, did that happen shortly before landing, or was that earlier on?
Earlier on, because we were over the German lines because we had bullet holes in the wings. You could see anti-aircraft shells breaking them, exploding a bit below us.
So what went through your mind when that was occurring?
After I seen that bullet come through, it was a next thing we get one in the rear end.
Do you know how long the ride was to get to the?
3.5 hours. Those gliders with maximum speed of 150 miles an hour. Start disintegrating on over that.
Were there any other gliders around, or just yours?
After we got there,
When you landed, yeah. Any other gliders around?
not then. I seen them went through the drop zone later on, and there's gliders all over the place there.
Did the British have anything else to say to you? So did the pilot go? Did the glider pilot go with you?
No, they started hauling in the other direction.
So where were you at in the glider? Just out of curiosity, were you
On the left-hand side, about in the middle of that seat.
the trip over? Did you talk much?
Not much. Yeah, pretty noisy.
Did you get airsick?
They had a lot of airsick pills before we left. I took some. I think about another half hour I would have been sick though. Started to feel kind of queasy by the time we landed.
I didn't realize this until recently, how dire the situation was at the landing zone. The enemy, if the British, they had some tanks that arrived about the time 1st Battalion was landing. 3rd Battalion had moved to the west side of the landing zone. That's the 401. And then 2nd Battalion was on the south side in an action, and then the 501 was on the west side as well. If those British tanks hadn't shown up, and they weren't even with the 30 Corps, they came from another area. If they hadn't showed up, likely the Germans would have overrun the landing zone just as 1st Battalion was landing. I didn't know it was that critical because they were being attacked with tanks. And 401 got hit really hard. The 2nd Battalion, the Germans that they ran into, okay, I should get a map out, but here's the landing zone. 3rd Battalion was over here, and 2nd Battalion was in here. And 1st Battalion, your battalion, had a lot more problems landing than what had gone on the previous day. And the 501 was over here, but the British tanks came in across the southern part and were able to protect that to help keep the enemy from overrunning it. But the 2nd Battalion, there were a lot of enemy forces down here between the canal, which was right here, in the landing zone, and they captured over 150 prisoners, but most of them after a while just gave up. They had put up quite a fight earlier, but after everything they'd seen, it's apparent that everything they had seen in France and stuff, they just thought, well, forget this. But they were really close to being able to overrun the landing zone, then that would have been a disaster. So were they able to take you from where you landed to the landing zone pretty quickly, or
Yeah.
did you arrive the same day the rest of the battalion did? That would have been the 19th?
Well, it took us 3 days on the convoy to catch up. They had a road open by that time.
Okay, so it did take you 3 days to get there. So you arrived on you're probably the day you flew in. Are you counting that as one day?
3rd day. We went third day. By that time, the Germans knew which direction they were coming from.
Yeah. Okay. So, but here's a question I have then: is the 3rd Battalion landed on the 19th, and then they moved across the canal. The Germans blew up the bridge over the canal. Engineers had to come and rebuild that bridge. And the Germans had sent tanks in from the east to try to retake that bridge. So did you get back in time to be involved in that fight around the windmill?
Nope.
So
I never saw a windmill when I was over there.
Okay.
And I read once that the German tank was chasing the company commander around a windmill.
Yeah,
I never seen that windmill.
Yeah, did I send you those reports, Captain Miller? I have his written report where he talks about that, about the German tank. So that was before you arrived. Did you get into any combat quickly after you got back?
Yeah.
Was that near the landing zone? Or was that when you moved north up to Veckel?
It was before we moved north. And German and British tankers, I wasn't involved with, but a bunch was supposed to meet them in a certain place and go out on patrol, ride the tanks.
Mm-hmm.
They went there and there the tanks were sitting. Couldn't find the crew. So they started going through the houses around there. They were in eating a meal with the Dutch family. Instead of being out there. You weren't supposed to keep any journals or any diary. It's a good thing some did, and some didn't know enough. But the orders, no journals, no diary. If you get captured, you can't. If you don't know anything, you can't tell them anything.
Have you ever looked at any maps of the area?
Didn't see many maps. Don Rich, he must have been in the headquarters, in the company headquarters, if he's seen maps.
Well, have you seen any maps? Well, Don was, he was kind of the go-to guy for the captain. He had an unusual ability with maps and different things, and so that he was a little bit, even though he wasn't a runner yet, he did have some insight as to what
He mustn't have got along with the captain too well.
No, he didn't.
What I heard him say.
No, he didn't get along with him at all. And I've been trying to figure that out. The only thing I can figure out is that Evans was a West Pointer, and he was really strict. And Don was a bit of a rebel. Don didn't like being told what to do. And I think that caused a rub between the captain and himself. Do you remember moving up to Veckel then?
Yeah.
Was that, you walked or marched?
No, we were trucked up.
We were trucked up there. Because you guys got there, I believe, earlier than 2nd Battalion. You arrived during the day, if I remember right. Not the evening, but during the day. And then the records indicate that you guys were near a bridge over the canal or river on the south side of town.
I don't know. I don't remember that. All I know is we dug in the back of a dike. There's a road on top of the dike. I can remember that first morning. We moved in about 3 o'clock in the morning and dug in. The Germans didn't know we were there before. They sure did then, because all those kids, about 15, 16 from the village, were out there with their bicycles sitting on the road looking at that.
So are you talking about a Houston? Up on the island area between the two rivers? Then, or Veckel?
I don't know if that was back on or not.
Veckel was a good-sized town, and it had a church. There's a church there. All 3 battalions got shelled really heavily when they moved up to Veckel. 2nd Battalion kind of got the worst of it because they were just west of the church, and the Germans had that sighted in. But the Miller's report also talks a lot about it. Mind if I read it to you a little bit?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it says, this was written by Miller. And he goes, much has been written about troops and tactics and strategies in conducting and handling men in battle. This is the story of a glider rifle company as it fought part of the campaign for Holland, just as it happened. Little has been written about the glider troops, and it's hoped that this may be of interest to all. This was a fight for the roads and bridges to lead to the northern flank of the German positions. And then he goes on to talk about, you guys left about 1200 on the 19th. That was the second day. It was D+2. The paratroopers left, a lot of them left on the 17th. 2nd and 3rd battalions left on the 18th. And then you guys left on the 19th. I had one B company guy get really mad at me because he always thought he went in on the 17th. Like all the guys said, that you had no idea. All you knew what was in front of you and what you were told to do. So visibility was poor. Fighter and bomber support could be seen still on the ground due to the poor flying conditions. Apparently they didn't put everything up in the air. The fog was so thick that it was impossible to see more than a few feet of tow cable in front of a glider. In your case, then you couldn't see the
Couldn't see the plane.
Couldn't see the
It was
plane.
behind him.
The flight was badly scattered, some leads being lost in the English Channel, some returning to England, and some just disappeared and were never heard from. Flak was encountered crossing the Belgian coast. Of course, that would be your story, increasing in intensity as the drop and landing zones approached. Glider men riding as co-pilots didn't know whether to wear a flak suit on their head, the seat of their pants, or over their chest, as intended. Of the 81 gliders carrying 1st Battalion, 39 got to the landing area, and Miller says he landed at 15:30. Only 8 of the 15 gliders for the company arrived. Of course, you wouldn't have been in a company glider. Some of the guys said Captain Evans wouldn't allow guys from the same squad because he didn't want to lose a whole squad, and he made the officers split up as well. That's the first I've heard of somebody riding with another company. That's pretty interesting. Did you know Herschel Parker?
No.
Talks about him taking on a German squad. Tech Sergeant Gordon Witt. Well, the next day, the company was called upon to clear some woods in the vicinity of Eindhoven with the help of some British tanks. What about First Sergeant Kenneth Whalen from River Falls, Wisconsin?
Yeah, he's their first sergeant, Sea Company.
First Sergeant Kenneth Whalen with an SCR.
He got killed in Korea, I heard.
And he apparently had a radio. They were using radios to communicate with the tanks that you were supposed to be with. But you said your group, the tanks didn't go.
Well, I wasn't involved with him, but I heard about it afterwards. And
Oh.
I couldn't find him. He had to hunt through the houses to find it.
Okay.
Tank crews.
So that's still before you got there. Then, okay. On the 22nd, a forced march made its way to Veckel, Holland. You said you went by truck to Veckel.
I went by truck up the area that you call the island.
And then there was a bridge that the company cleared. I'm still wondering if if you said it took 3 days. Do you
Is that
know?
counting the day you landed at, or 3 additional days?
3 additional days.
Okay, so he's
So
not
it's
there
actually,
yet.
there you go. So that'd be the 23rd, right?
Yeah. Did you guys run into any enemy soldiers getting there?
We were being hauled by the British yet. The machine gun fire off the side of the road, not too far out. They pull over. The British drivers all get down in the ditch and start brewing tea.
So then you would have arrived in Veckel about that time. And then they cleared the woods, but you're still going to be arriving here. They took a lot of prisoners. During the next several days, the company was moved from position to position on either side of the canal to meet the attacks of the enemy in his attempt to seize this vital bridge. It's on the south side of town. On Veckel, there's a canal that goes through. C Company was originally on the west side of the road. It was important to keep that up, but it sounds like they moved you guys around a lot. Which platoon were you in?
First.
It says the company was joined by the 2nd Rifle Platoon, and the rest of the weapons platoon arrived by truck. Casualties were mounting. There was a Lieutenant Robert Levitt of Pennsylvania was killed. Lieutenant Charles Hauser was wounded. One other question. It says here there were 2 German SS troopers approached one of the company's outposts with the white flag. Do you know anything about this?
No.
They had an American paratrooper sergeant with them. He insisted the Germans were acting in good faith, that they be allowed to return to their lines. I guess they were taking him back. I don't know why. Don said that when they were in Holland, it just wasn't convenient to take prisoners, and oftentimes they let them go. The company refused to let the SS troopers go and sent them to the rear. I've read it before, but not with the talk about they did a prisoner exchange there. The company commanders of 1st Battalion were taken in reconnaissance to go to Nijmegen, Holland, and that's when you moved to the island. C Company bivouacked that night in an orchard, subject to enemy artillery fire. Do you remember an orchard? Because I've heard several of the guys talk about that, but that doesn't mean you were there.
There's an orchard on every farm there.
When you moved to the island, okay, Nijmegen would be down here, and you had the Wall River down here. And up here you had the city with about the movie The Bridge Too Far. Arnhem. Yeah. Arnhem's up here. You guys were trucked to Elst, and then you marched during the night down to a small place called Hemmen, which was right next to Dodoord. And right north of there was a really large apple orchard where there was a lot of artillery and there were a lot of casualties. First and second battalions were fairly close. I have the military coordinates of where you guys were. But like you were saying, though, there's a lot of orchards around there. Let's see.
One place there was a jam factory.
So what do you remember about the jam factory?
We raided it.
Yeah. Apparently it went back and forth between the Germans and the Americans.
Anyway, I remember a couple of guys went over there. They said that the lieutenant sitting there milking a goat, and he looks at him and he says, "I'm looking at him. I don't see anything behind me."
There's a guy in G Company who was a replacement. He's in my book, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name right now. Who was in that factory? Did you ever actually make it there?
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't very big, was it?
No, it's a pretty good sized warehouse.
But this guy married a German lady. He stayed in the military and was stationed in Germany for a while and ended up marrying a German lady. And her brothers were actually in the same jam factory during that time. Or they were enemy soldiers. It was wasn't it on the north side up near the river?
I don't know. I tell you.
Sure. He does talk about combat fatigue. Did you run into that very much with people you knew?
Well, there was two in the second platoon that were hauled out for combat fatigue. They used to dig in together, the two of them. One was talking to me and said, my buddy, I never thought that had happened to him. Well, they strapped him down on a stretcher on a jeep, and he going across the canal on one of these pontoon bridges. They got shelled, and the jeep went in the canal, and he drowned and then strapped out of that jeep. The other one says, I never thought that had happened to him. About a week or two later, same thing happened to him. I didn't see it, but they said they were getting shelled, and he jumped out running around the area going boom, 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 with it. They had to tackle him and then shipped him back to
Did he ever come back?
No.
When you saw that happen, what would go through your mind?
I didn't see it happen. I just heard about it.
Or if you heard about it happening to other people, how did that make you feel?
Well, they always said, yours is not to wonder why, yours is just to do or die, you're expendable.
He talks about how mentally and physically tired, having had little relief since September 19th.
They always used to say, never stand if you can sit down. And if you can lay down instead of sit down, sometimes it's the only way you got to rest at all.
At 0500, October 7th, an enemy attack was repulsed. It was an artillery barrage. So the enemy had an excellent observation of the Arnhem area and had plenty of artillery, a fact that they did not let us forget during the entire campaign.
They had plenty of artillery there for a long time.
Here's a name for you. It says Lieutenant Clifford Bolander. He was first platoon.
Yeah, platoon commander.
What kind of a leader was he?
Everybody liked him.
Yeah, it says he was from Youngstown, Ohio.
After Miller got promoted to major, Bolander was company commander.
What about Miller?
Never had much to do with him.
So you didn't see or hear of him much.
They had a company executive officer. Everybody hated him.
Who was that?
He was a second platoon leader in Normandy. These guys would tell me, he said, there was 10 of us in a ditch for all wounded. Anyway, they said that he was talking to the first platoon leader. He got killed. Everybody liked him, but he got killed in Normandy. I said, this son of a bitch in Skomsky, he comes through a scratch. But anyway, they had 10 of them lined up in the ditch or wounded. The other one, I think they said his name was Peta. He says, we're going to have to leave pretty soon. We can't take them with us. I think we should shoot them. He said, Peta says, well, you shoot one guy. He says, I'll shoot you before you get very far. But anyway, who was going to shoot them? Yeah, the wounded?
Who was the guy that made the threat to keep them from doing it?
Said his name was Peta. I don't know. He got killed.
Okay, so that was in France.
He was the first platoon leader at that time. Okay.
So are you saying that happened in France?
The 10
Yes.
people in the ditch.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the guy's name was, I don't know, last name was Rob. I can't remember. He was one of those that been laying in the ditch. In the Netherlands, he'd walk up behind him and all the time we were someplace in the rest area. Obviously, you son of a bitch. He said, if you stand in front of me and get in front of me anytime, he says, you're dead. He'd keep telling him that all the time, every time. He stuck to the company commander like glue.
So he was talking about not wanting to take U.S. wounded, not enemy wounded, or you're talking about?
U.S. wounded. He said, we can't take it with him. We'll have to leave him on. We can't leave him for the Germans. I think we should shoot him. There wasn't only that one guy that was cussing him out all the time, but all the rest of them felt about the same way, you know.
Oh, wow.
Those 10 that were in that ditch. They finally transferred them to battalion headquarters.
This is a map that Captain Miller made. This would be west, of course, east. This is the north, and here's a railroad track. Here's some houses. This would be Dodewood. But do you remember? He's saying that these were ditches.
We didn't know they were there till later. That's why the Germans could get there without being seen.
Do you remember Don talking about, whether in his book or up at the Glider Symposium, about taking out a German machine gun with his bazooka? That happened right here. So you guys were right. G Company was here, and C Company was here.
Town about Houston, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that was standing there was the railroad station.
Mm-hmm. Here's another map made by Miller. Arnhem, and there's Nijmegen. You guys went up in here near Elst to get off the trucks, and then you marched. And then there's that little town Hein, and then Dodewood is where you guys were, and then you moved up to the railroad tracks. And then that location on that map is right there.
And Houston, 2004, I was my wife, partly underrated by the Dutch government.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Houston. Mayor. On this side, there's New Houston. This side is Old Houston. Well, Houston wasn't nothing but that little railroad station. Mm-hmm. I think Old Houston is just as new as New Houston.
Yeah, after what happened. On October 9th, Miller and Don and Jack and everybody I've talked to that remembered said that there was the worst artillery barrage they had ever seen coming down on Houston. Do you have much recollection of that? It happened towards the evening on the 9th, and then the Germans attacked, and it went on into the next day. And the Germans just kept coming and coming, but the 327 never gave up any ground, except that up in 2nd Battalion's area, they did run a tank. They did get a tank through 327 lines, but it was destroyed. And another tank turned around and went back. Do you recall that night of real heavy artillery?
I don't know if that's the night one of the guys talked to British artillery ran over afterwards and said
That's it.
Worst shelling that ever since North Africa. Mm-hmm. 2 guys to my left was about 60 feet over. They dropped a shell right in their hole. That was the only casualty in the company, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it said in here, so they didn't survive.
Oh, no.
But yeah, he does mention that. What I read
there was a company, I think it was F Company, about 200-300 yards behind us in an orchard, dug in a reserve. 300 yards to our rear.
Mm-hmm.
Dug in
yeah, they were.
Most of that shells landed in the back there.
Yeah. The way they described it was they'd hit you guys hard on the front lines. And then they'd blow a whistle. I don't know if you remember the whistle. But they got, some of the guys talked about the Germans using whistles in this battle, and then they would attack. And then the artillery would lift, and while the front line was fighting, the artillery would hit whatever company was back in reserve. And during that fight, F Company was back in reserve and got hit really hard. And the same thing happened to F Company a few days later when they got moved up north. as well. Now, I'm just kind of curious as to what your opinion is, because everybody's different. Don described that, he prefaced it by saying that war was awful. It just wasn't a good experience. But he said the worst thing was not being able to do anything about it, was to take the artillery. I don't know, do you have any opinion on that, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, as soon as the German artillery let up, then artillery started in. It dropped them right in front of our foxhole and then walked them back towards the German line. So many of those shells on your bounce back and forth in your foxhole.
Was it with enough force that it was painful, or?
That just pick you up, throw you against the side of the hole.
Miller's command post was hit during that battle. He talks about the command post house burning that night. You remember Robert, he said that Miller said something like 2,000 shells hit the company that night. And that was just on C Company. They just said it just never, the guys in G Company said it just never stopped. It just.
So 2,000 shells and only 2 were casualties? That's a miracle.
Yeah, well, they were well dug in.
Yeah, but wow.
Harper, I don't know if you ever met Colonel Harper.
Well, I've seen him.
Yeah. But they said that pretty much what I've read, he had a reputation, not everybody liked it. His name was Bud, but they called him Bud. And his nickname was Dig 'em, like dig them, deeper Bud. Meaning he was really big on digging foxholes. So, did you get to be pretty good at it?
Yeah. Fort Jackson, and it was sandy. I think we dug, seemed like we dug most of it, poured up, and filled it in again afterwards. That fort didn't have a single blade of grass on it. Grass all over now. A couple of filling stations and brick buildings now. The biggest thing is no company mess halls anymore. Big fancy brick building. Simon Francis dining facility, wasn't it?
Yeah, it says right here, after that attack, the rifle and weapons platoons were firing like mad. A check revealed that only 2 men had been killed by the tremendous barrage. So that you're saying those would have been the 2 guys to your left. Okay, which would have been south.
Mm-hmm.
How far away did you say?
About 55 or 60 feet on the left. They put a shell right in their hole.
Do you remember that?
One of them was blowing on the hole. The other one was sitting on the edge, but his head was gone. If I remember right, it was late in the afternoon. You could see good yet.
That many shells. The things I've read and stuff before, they were just amazed that there weren't more. Because not only did they get hit with artillery, the enemy was attacking. And they lost on the front where G Company was, C Company was. And the railroad tracks are here, G Company's here. C Company is here, and A Company is kind of this way.
Okay.
But they lost, the Germans lost 2 whole companies. They just wouldn't quit. They just kept coming. And then the next day, the Germans had asked for permission to come and pick up their killed and wounded out in the field.
Well, they ran out with Red Cross flag.
Mm-hmm. So you remember that. Don said that they...
I don't think there was only wounded that they're picking up either.
What do you mean?
I mean, I think they were picking up soldiers that were shot, who were wounded at all, carrying them out of there.
Don said that they brought in in the ambulance, they brought in a mortar. A mortar where they could get closer and sight it in. And I don't know if you remember the book, but that's when he got hit and he got knocked. They thought he was dead. And it was from that. And he said Harper never allowed it again. So you do remember that. How far out in front of you were they?
Probably 40, 50 feet.
Really? So you could see them?
Oh, yes. They weren't very far away.
Could you hear them talk?
Hmm?
Could you hear them talk?
Yes. At night up there in the other ones, you'd hear them German soldiers at night. They could call and roll call. Wolfgang, Heinz, Fritz. Every night you'd... It wasn't only one night, it was night after night. Wolfgang, Heinz, Fritz. heard the same names all being called out every night, night after night.
Don always said that they were so orderly. They were very predictable. They just. Tom Nyland. I don't know if you ever met Tom Nyland. He was the S2 for 2nd Battalion, and some of the things he wrote is they were just creatures of habit. They just did the same thing over and over again. But it does say here that would have been during the day. That part that you were talking about. This is kind of interesting. It says darkness fell. When was roll call for them? Was it during the night or?
Yeah.
Okay. It says darkness fell, and still the attack continued, with only occasional lulls as the enemy regrouped. All night they could be heard from the ditch rows, curses in German. A whistle would sound, and down the road they'd come, climbing over their own dead. And so here the enemy dead was stacked in an area, and later in the morning a truce was allowed the enemy to remove their wounded. In repelling the attack, C Company alone expended 300 rounds of 60 millimeter mortar shells, 11,250 rounds of 30 caliber machine gun, 10,000 rounds of light machine gun ammunition. The number of grenades that were thrown was so great that no accurate estimate could be made. Following the truce, the shelling continued, were relieved. Somebody in the company that relieved you lit a match and received a barrage that wounded several men. It talks again about combat fatigue. Don said that after a while it became like a game of cat and mouse, what you recall. But after the main fighting kind of died down, they'd take sniper shots at you guys, and you guys would take sniper shots back.
Well, apparently they had lots of shells to get rid of, the killer shells. They see somebody walking on the open, one man, they start dropping shells on them.
So what was it? You had to stay down, couldn't move during the day much? What were your thoughts at that time? I mean, was it just overwhelming? You just did what you were told to do, or did you think you guys were winning, or what were you thinking?
Didn't have any idea that whether we were winning or losing.
Do you remember how close they got to you during the fighting?
Well, if you'd hear anything at night, you'd throw a grenade out there. Every once in a while, in the morning, there'd be a German soldier wounded laying out there, out from here to the street away, or else you'd see a dead cow laying there. Every bush at night, it looked like a man sitting there.
How about radio school? And he said he never went.
Really? You didn't go to radio school?
Radio school. I said there was a report that said you were going to radio school.
Okay.
So we're wondering if it was code for something.
I don't know. Anything else about the island area that you want to share or can think about talking about?
I think it was when we was left there. I think that's the time we were hauled, trucked out by the Canadian trucking outfit, government. Stopped by the road a while once, and somebody yelled out, Limeys. He jumps out. See that patch? You might wear a uniform that looks like a Limey, but that's Canadian, that's not a Limey. Boy, he sure didn't want to be called a Limey.
That's funny. That's funny.
The island where you milked the cows, Daddy, or was that later?
That's when we started sending to a rest area every once in a while. I don't know if it was 5 or farm buildings for about the same long time, and then it was either 3 or 5 days, I can't remember which it was. And then they'd go back another 5 miles farther back and stay in a great big school building, and then you'd walk back again and switch it in about 3 o'clock in the morning.
So then you went back to France. You went to France.
Yes.
For a while. What was that like for you?
That was a good camp. There's flush toilets, showers, even had potato peelings in the mess halls. Or potato peelings.
So getting back to the showers, tell them how many showers you had during the island. You said
we had one chance to get a shower up there, and it was in November. And it was a British shower unit, and they were pumping water out of the river without heating it.
So you can imagine being in a war zone for, what, close to 60 days, one shower, no change of clothes.
River water.
And river water in November. Can you imagine how cold that was?
Water. That I hadn't heard before, about where the water came from.
So hot showers in France, probably.
Yeah, in the camp, Marmalade.
Thank you for joining us for the interview of Larry Michaelis from Wisconsin and his experiences in World War II with the 327 Glider Infantry. Please join us next time as we go to part 2 and take a close look at Larry's experiences in the Battle of the Bulge. Thank you, and have a great day.
Oh, once I was happy, but now I'm airborne, riding in gliders all tattered and torn. The pilots are daring, all caution they scorn, and the pay is exactly the same.
One day I answered a popular call and got in the army to stay on the ball. And infantry outfit, foot soldiers and all is where they put me to train. They gave me basic at Camp Airborne. There I was happy and never forlorn, till they split us up and made us airborne,
and the pay is exactly the same. Once I was happy, but now I'm airborne, riding in gliders all tattered and torn. The pilots are daring, all caution they scorn, and the pay is exactly the same.
Once I was infantry, now I'm a dope, riding in gliders attached to a rope. Safety and landing is only a hope, and the pay is exactly the same. We fight in fatigues, no fancy jumpsuits, no bright leather jackets, no polished jump boots. We crash land by glider without parachutes,
and the pay is exactly the same. Once I was happy, but now I'm airborne, riding in gliders all tattered and torn. The pilots are daring, all caution they scorn, and the pay is exactly the same.
We work in headquarters, we sit on a chair, we figure out tactics and take to the air. We fly over Jerry and drop in his hair, and the pay is exactly the same. We glide through the air with the greatest of ease. We do a good job and we try hard to please. The finance department we pester and tease, but
and the pay is exactly the same. Once I was happy, but now I'm airborne, riding in gliders all tattered and torn. The pilots are daring, all caution they scorn, and the pay is exactly the same.